All right, everybody. This is Cali Cat Tap Talks, and I have Andrea Leeb here. And we need to sit back and listen to her story because she's got a story to tell us. Go ahead,
Th-
Andrea.
Thank you, Callie. So I'm going to start with the beginning. For some of you on the line, I always like to give a little trigger warning about because I'm going to talk about something that involves child sexual abuse. And my story begins when I was very young, when I was 4.5. And the first time that I remember my father molesting me. And that day, my mother asked my father to give me a bath. And I was very young, but I knew there was something strange about the way my father was touching me, something strange about his breathing. And that day, when my mother walked into the bathroom, she came to check on us to see what was going on because it was taking a long time. She screamed, crumpled to the floor like a paper doll. My father caught her. And I actually was so little, I thought I had killed her. Whatever it was that we were doing, I was responsible for killing her. And she fell to the floor, was unconscious for a few minutes. And when she woke, she was blind. And that day, my father took my mother to the hospital, and he told me that I had caused my mother to go blind and that we had to keep the secret of what happened in the bathroom with us. Now, my mother did get her sight back in about a month, but as I have written a book more recently, and as I write in my book, my mother remained physically blind for a month, but willfully blind for decades. So the abuse continued, and despite it, I survived. I was a really good student, and I was able to keep going. I was 13 when the abuse finally ended. And I was able to keep going, although to some harm to myself. I cut, I acted out, I acted out both. I didn't know the date, I was hyper vigilant on one end, and on the other end, when it came to boys, I didn't know where safety ended and danger began. So I had a very traumatic childhood. There was a lot of violence. My dad was an alcoholic, but I kept going, and I told myself, I'm going to keep going. And if I pretend long enough and hard enough, I'm never going to tell the secret. I'm going to keep it the secret, everything that happened in the house. And my parents wanted to keep the secret kept, and I was a kid, and I listened to them. I kept the secret, and I thought, if I'm smart enough, pretty enough, perfect enough, I can keep going and put this whole thing into a little box and pretend it never happened. So it's a long story, and I'm not going to tell you all of it today, but what I am going to tell you is how I came to be today. So eventually what happened to me is when I was 33, I had kept the secret all that time, and it was very hard. I like to say my intimacy muscle was severed, and I couldn't keep long relationships with people. Everything was on the surface for me. And when I was 33, I was on a subway and it went dark. This is before 9/11, and we were less scared than we are today. And, everybody was angry as opposed to scared. And a man or somebody grabbed my breast. We'll say it was a man because it felt like a big hand on the subway. And after that, I completely spiraled. By that time, I was an attorney. I had been doing pretty well from the outside, so I thought, with my life. But like I said, if you peeled back the little Band-Aid very far, you could see it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't so perfect after all. I had a complete breakdown, and I started having panic attacks. I started wanting to kill myself. I had cut all the way through high school, but had forced myself to stop in college, and I started cutting again. I really unraveled. I had to get help. I ended up spending 12 days in an inpatient facility, and it was there that I finally realized I I couldn't live anymore. That I couldn't live without telling this secret. I had to keep going. So that is the beginning of my story. I mean, that's the beginning. Why I'm here today is in the years that passed, I got therapy, and I slowly and surely started to heal. It took a long, long time for me to heal, but I slowly started to heal. I ended up ultimately getting married, and I have a successful relationship. But for a long time, I wasn't going to tell my story. I, I, I was, I told my story to my therapist. I told my story to my husband before I married him. I did keep my relationship with my parents in my life only because, despite everything, I really loved my mother. And, these incest and child abuse like this is such a complicated issue. It's easy to judge from the outside, but really complicated. So I kept my mother in my life, and I had to keep my father. But I kept going, but I kept getting therapy. And finally, and I wasn't going to tell the story, but then two things happened. In 2017, as you all recall, we had the Me Too movement. And when I started reading all the information about the Me Too movement, I started thinking to myself, wow, I have a story. I could tell my story too. Right around the same time my father died. So it was a little bit more freeing, although my mother was still alive and she still absolutely refused to acknowledge what happened. And And as much as I hate to admit it to you all, to anybody, she knew what happened. I have a younger sister. She was not abused by my father, but my mother knew what happened. She knew about the violence in the house, and she knew about the sexual abuse. There were telltale signs. There were sheets. I was a very, you know, just hyper vigilant, frightened child. She knew. And, but she wouldn't admit it. And maybe she couldn't admit it. I can't say. I mean, she was only 20 when she had me. So maybe she just wasn't ready. Maybe she shouldn't have had children at all. But regardless, she knew. But I hadn't, I kept my relationship with her, but my father dying allowed me a freedom. And then the Me Too movement, I started thinking, wow, maybe, just maybe, I could write this story and I could help somebody else. Because I suffered for a really, really long time. The ages between, uh, 4 and even 33, even when I looked like I wasn't suffering, I was suffering a lot. I had shame, I had guilt, I really suffered as a person. And maybe I can help somebody else and get them to tell their story sooner. So I started writing a book. I had always been a writer. There are things people always ask me, what are the things that saved you as a child? And, sometimes there's a person, but I didn't have a person. And my family moved a lot, so there was no teacher or close family friend. Even my grandmother didn't want to see it. But what there were for me was books, and what there was for me was writing stories. When I was 10, my mother bought me a diary, but I knew I couldn't write my story into a diary. So I made up another girl named Emily, and Emily kind of had a much better life. She was popular. Had a good family. So it was writing and books saved me from a very young age. And I decided maybe it was time for me. And, when I was 14, I read Maya Angelou's books. Now I know why a caged bird sings. And it was the first time I realized that I was not alone, that I wasn't the only person who went through this. In Maya Angelou's case, it was her stepfather. But, I knew, and started to find my voice on the page. So we fast forward, and I kept writing. Wasn't easy. I had to excavate all of that childhood information. I can tell you right now, I went right back into therapy. I needed help and did a lot of yoga, a lot of therapy, but I kept writing. And in this year, I finished my book last in 2023. And right around that time, my mother passed away.
Mhm.
And which was also made it a little easier to tell the story because I still had a lot of guilt with my mother. Um, and I will tell you, it's in my book, but a spoiler alert: my mother did forgive, did ask for my forgiveness 2 weeks before her death.
Wow.
It was the
That's
first
she knew.
time ever she knew. She told me she should have left my father, and she told me, I hope that, and I'm going to get choked up because she told me that she hoped that someday I could forgive her. And actually, the last words that I said to my mother before she died were, "I forgive you." I found it in my heart to forgive her. I she asked about my father. I'm not lie and tell you I forgave him because I didn't. I'm not going to. But for my mother, I forgave her. And I had this book and published it. And I thought as I was writing it, like I said, I thought, okay, I'll write this book and I'll help one person. But as I started writing it, I got this great gift. And the gift that I got was from the book. The book gave me a gift. And what I started realizing is I could do more with this than just help one person. I could help a lot of people,
It
not
can help
just
a
from
lot
the
of
book.
healing.
Uh-huh.
A lot
And
of
help
healing.
a lot of people heal, but it wasn't just from the book. I could get out there. I could speak to people like you, Callie. I could get on radio shows and TV shows. I could do more. And I was really fortunate. I was able to join the UCLA a Rape Treatment Center advisory board, and I have connected with an organization called RAIN, which is the Rape and Incest National Network. And I've been having the ability to go out and speak publicly. And I got another gift because, I had all the time of my life been an attorney and I've worked hard. And I realized that, you know what? I didn't need the royalties from this book. I could do better if I gave those royalties to someone else and these organizations. So that was my other gift, was that I call this my third act. Because
Mhm.
my first act as a young girl, I didn't really touch on it, but I started my career as a nurse and then went to law school. And now I'm in my third act, which is writer and advocate. And as part of my third act, I've been able to donate money from the book. And the book's done surprisingly well. It's become a bestseller, USA Today bestseller. I was able to write my first check to the Rape and Incest National Network for $3,000 and give
That's
them
awesome.
money. So this is where my story is today. I've gone through it kind of quicker than I normally do. It normally, because I have this book. It's called Such a Pretty Picture, and the book, as I said, the royalties. I'm not the publisher's money is the publisher's money, but the money for the book what is goes to the Rape and Incest National Network. Now,
Mhm.
and to local rape treatment centers, including the UCLA Rape Treatment Center. I also get to volunteer once a week. I get to go, and I have the best job ever. It's non-paying, but I get to be where in LA the Rape Treatment Center has a program called Stewart House, where they bring children who have been abused. Um, they come into Stewart House and they have their entire the police are there, the social workers are there. Everyone is in one place, the forensic social workers. And so the child doesn't have to tell their story 10 times to 10 different people. They can tell their story once to the social worker or psychologist, and those other people are kind of listening in a room below. They get to see it. There's also this huge playroom. So it's a long day for the kids because they have to talk. The parents, if they're non-perpetrating, have to talk. And I get to be the play lady for the kids when they come in, which is really great because I'm going to tell you, I never got to play as a child.
Mm.
So, and I get to play with the kids when they come
Wow, that
in.
is so cool. That is so cool.
It is
So
incredible.
yeah, that is incredible. You're an amazing, young lady, and you are giving back in so many ways. Um, it's just amazing to hear from you
Thank
and
you.
hear on the show. Your book is deeply, personal. What gave you the courage to finally put your experience into writing?
Well, and it's funny because I have a degree in writing, but I always wrote fiction. And I was like, no way, never going to write a memoir, never going to write this story. But like I said, I think it was reading the other um, survivors of other things and other kinds of sexual abuse as
Mhm,
part of the Me Too movement that really helped. Because I was reading everybody come forward and I was inspired. And I was inspired by Maya Angelou. I was inspired by a couple other writers whose work I had read. A woman named Sue Williams Silverman, and also Dorothy Allison. And reading their books, I was like, well, they did it. They told their stories. And so that helped. I wasn't an easy process. I second guessed myself a lot. I I cried a lot. Like I said, I went back in therapy and there were a lot of moments where I questioned, like, why am I doing this to myself? Like, do I really need to go back here? I've had all this therapy, but it became clearer and clearer to me that I could maybe help somebody. And honestly, I got to help myself. I get to live this whole other life now, you know, which is dedicated toward doing something that's purposeful. Which is in the time that I was practicing law, I was worked at for profits and non for profits, but I did work at, and I always thought I want to do something more. I mean, it's great. I had a good salary, I had a good job, but I want to do something more with my life. I want to look back on my life and say, I gave people something that maybe to help make the world another better place. So I think knowing that I was going to do that, and the more that I got into it and started following the survivor community,
mhm.
unbeknownst to me, all of these stories were going to start blowing up. I think because of Epstein and some of the things that we've all been reading about. I didn't know that that was going to happen when I started writing. But the more that I read, the more that I realize, I know about the statistics, and the sexual abuse among children is really, really high. It's 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys. And unfortunately, 90% of those cases are from somebody the child knows. So knowing that I wasn't alone really, really kind of helped me. As I started reading more about this, I
Mhm.
realized that I could, so that was part of it. I think that's how I stayed inspired. Although it wasn't easy. I mean, a lot of getting the book published was really hard. I was told on no uncertain terms several times that the writing was good, and I think it is actually. I'll let myself own that, and and then but I was told that neither I nor my father was famous enough to merit this memoir. And the point is, this doesn't just happen to famous people. It happens to regular people. I mean, my father was college professor. My mother was, not, she wasn't, she didn't have a degree when I was young, but she got a job as a teacher. My family was, middle class to upper middle class family. And what I learned, this isn't a crime, the crime of child sexual abuse. It's not a crime of race. It's not a crime of socioeconomics. It's not a crime of religion. It's not any of these things. This is a crime of opportunity. And I started realizing I want people to know that this exists because maybe there's a kid somewhere that's suffering and is going to be able to get the help that they need. And that can change the trajectory of their lives. Maybe they're not going to cut themselves to pieces or
Mhm.
act out promiscuously or want to kill themselves by the time they're 14 years old. Maybe all of those things can be spared for that one child.
And that's true. So, the title itself is powerful. What does such a pretty face, the picture, to
Picture.
symbolize the picture would symbolize to you emotionally?
So I have to be honest because that's what I am. I didn't come up with the title. I was really struggling with the title. I had all kinds of titles, complicit, all these different titles. And my publisher helped me find it. But there's a line in my book where my mother and I are looking at a picture of me when I'm a baby and she's holding me. And she says, such a pretty picture. And and it was in the book I write, and at the time I thought I was about 10. That was the time in my life where I was happy, where my mother loved me, because my mother got very cold and distant to me after the abuse happened. I mean, she really couldn't handle it.
Mhm.
So I think what the title means to me, why I stuck with it when they suggested it, it means it was so perfect because my family was a pretty picture. I mean, if you looked at us from the outside, everything looked perfect. The, you know, looking, if you didn't open the door, as long as you kept the door closed. And to some extent, I was a pretty picture. I had gone, like I said, to school for nursing. I went to a good college. I had gotten a scholarship to school. I went to law school. Had a good job. I always, was really careful about the way that I presented myself in public.
Mhm.
I was a pretty picture, for lack of a better term. So, and on the book cover that they gave me, there's little lines that are crossed out through the words. They're
Oh,
very
really?
small. Uh-huh. I'll show you the book cover because I have. You can see the little lines are crossed out
Yes.
in just almost so because it's not such a pretty picture after all. And that was what it meant to me was that we can't just rely on the outside because you don't know what's happening to people inside. And where I volunteer, they give the children 1 year of therapy as well as a non-perpetrating parent. And like I said, it makes such a big difference. But if you just rely on the pretty picture, everybody can pretend to a point, and then we can't. And that's what I've learned about this too, is that, a lot of people try to just any kind of childhood sexual trauma or abuse, some people try to pretend it doesn't happen
Mhm.
and it always catches up with you. There's just, you can't, it just is the secret for me almost became as bad as the abuse, if that can make sense to you.
Yeah, because you were keeping it inside and it was hurting you more and you wanna tell somebody, so that does make sense. Does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, while writing your memoir, what was there a chapter, um, that was the hardest for you to revisit?
Well, I think the first chapter is the scene of the molestation was really hard for me to revisit. I think there were chapters throughout. There was another chapter in about the early in the book that was um hard. My mother, as I said, turned away from me after, and when she got her sight back, she really didn't. Uh, I sort of changed our relationship. I became her protector. I was so worried that I would hurt her again. I kept that blame. And my mother had her own breakdown and she would hit me all the time. And I realized, I thought as a little kid that she hit me because there was something bad about me. And I was a pretty hyper vigilant, hyper well behaved child.
Mhm.
And there was a chapter I wrote about the first time that somebody I knew died. I went to the funeral with my mother. We're Jewish, and there's something called sitting shiva that Jewish people do. It's like they sit. It's every religion has it. It's a mourning period, and we went to pay our respects to this family. It was my friend's grandmother, and I was just about 5 3/4, and I noticed that everybody was very sad, very, very sad, and they all were the family particularly. Other people were eating, but the family I noticed was sad, and I it hit me that they really loved the grandmother because they missed her so much, and I wanted to make my mother love me again. So I didn't really know what death was, but was starting to have some idea. I was a pretty precocious kid too,
Mhm.
and I thought if I die, then my mother will love me again. So I this was hard to write, more even harder in some ways than the abuse, although that was pretty hard. Some of the abuse scenes were very hard. I stuffed my nose with toilet paper. I waited. My mother hit me one day really badly and with a sponge, and it I got so upset, and it was shortly after this funeral. So I stuffed my nose with toilet paper, and I stuffed my ears with cotton balls, and I stuffed the toilet paper so high up that when my mother actually found me, she had to use tweezers to get it out. And I used tweezers to poke it in, and I taped up my mouth. My father had a Scotch tape dispensary, and I took it and I taped up my mouth, and I closed my door, and I waited to die. And I wasn't even 6 years old, and I really didn't want to live anymore. And that to me is so sad. It's
It
so
is.
sad. And revisiting that, and when my mother found me, she cried, and she stopped hitting me after that. So I think our relationship was never, it was always cold, and I think on some level she was struggling with the guilt of whatever was going on. I know that. I know that now, but I it was so sad for me. So that was really hard to write. I wrote it, I took it out. I was like, "Oh, are people gonna believe this?" I took it out, I put it in, and finally I was like, "It's true and it's my story and I'm putting it in." The abuse was hard to write too. I have vivid memories of my father touching me, and those scenes were hard to write. And of course, and then in high school, in junior high school, I was assaulted by 3 boys. So in the woods, when I went to a party with one boy and found out the party was non-existent.
A non-existent party.
As the one of the boys told me, I was the party. And, at the time, I had been a little bit, kissing and kissing a lot of boys and a little bit promiscuous. And so I had the, reputation, as it were. And so they 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 assaulted me, and
Oh,
that was a hard chapter to write because I was only
yeah,
14,
yeah,
and um, but I think in some ways the whole thing was hard to write. So
yeah. I am sorry to hear that. So,
it's
uh,
okay because there's a happy ending, I guess.
yeah.
The happy ending, is the
Happy ending
ending.
is that you're here, you're telling your story, people are listening, and you're helping people,
Yes, and
through your story.
I tell people, it is possible to heal. If I could heal, you can heal. Everyone can heal, but we have to get help. And I know how difficult I think, it's difficult these days. I know that I was lucky that I had the ability to get help for myself. But, crisis centers and hotlines still exist, and there are still places that will help you, which is kind of one of the reasons I want to help fund as much as possible. Um, but if that's my message. So that's the happy ending. And honestly, I have had a good life. I did heal from after I was an inpatient. About 8 years later, I met my husband that I've been married to for 25 years. So the intimacy muscle was sewn back together again. And I have a life filled with people who love me and who I love, community, friends.
Hmm.
So it is possible for survivors to heal, and uh, but you need to get help.
Yeah. So writing your book, it it allowed you to heal, it seemed.
Gave
It
me
was
another
comforting.
level.
Yeah. And then what about reclaiming your voice?
So let me just, because I was pretty healed before I started writing the book. I just want to, I'm sorry, I've had that lingering cold that's going around.
So say it's
Um,
okay.
but I think writing the book gave me the ability to begin to reclaim my voice. And now, when I'm not coughing, going on podcasts like this are helping me move forward with and going out in public, moderating panels, speaking in public. But that's really helped. My voice is loud now, and my voice is loud about this issue. So that has helped me reclaim my voice.
So
You know, I
there's many survivors out there that are struggling to speak out. Um, what would you tell them? How would you get them to speak out without being scared?
so what I tell them, and I just, I think the first step is to call, there are these hotlines. You can call them. You can talk to somebody on the phone. If, there's not, we get to pick what our justice is, and we get to pick how far we go. Back when this all happened to me, there really wasn't as many avenues for criminal penalties as there are today, but we still get to pick them. We don't have to go any further than we need to go. But the first step is really call a hotline, call a therapist, call a counselor, tell a pastor. I don't, some trusted person, and begin to tell your story. And don't be afraid, because it wasn't your fault. But I used to hate the word victim, but I don't hate it anymore. If you use it a lot at the rape treatment center, because you were a victim of a crime. It's as simple as that. A crime was perpetrated against you. And if another kind of crime that wasn't sexual in nature was perpetrated against you, you would not feel this amount of shame that you probably might feel. But you were a victim of a crime, and you have a right to tell your story. And you have, you should, and getting help will help you live, because you don't need to live in shame, and you don't need to live in sadness. You know, that's what I would tell them.
Wow. I don't even know what to say after that. And there's a lot of
Mm.
people out there that are living in silence, and
A
it's time
lot.
for them to come out of their silence and feel safe, and nobody's going to
Right.
look at you any differently. I mean, you need the help.
And you can tell
Yeah.
in confidence, you
Hmm.
can tell that, you can tell in confidence. But there are places, and you don't have to, I know we are seeing a lot of people being very public, and I am, I've been through like you said, I have healed quite a bit. I thought I was completely healed when I started writing the book, but then I learned I had a whole other, I mean, I'm like an onion, and a whole other layer of healing to do. But you don't have to write a book. You don't have to go out and talk publicly. But what you can do is help yourself. I mean, that's the first thing. And help yourself. You know, when I
Hmm.
gave you those numbers, I mean, you're not alone to survivors. That 1 in 4 and 1 in 6, that's reported cases.
Oh,
Imagine
really?
what, uh-huh. That is the Rape and Incest National Network reported cases. It's there are, and that's for before the age of 18. And that, things happen after the age of 18. And for young women or older women or men, everywhere I go, somebody tells me that this has happened to them. Every single time I speak at a bookstore, somebody comes up to me and tells me that and thanks me. And but if something happens to you, let's say you're out and something does happen. If you call a rape treatment center, you can go and you can get tested, you can get medicine, you can talk to somebody, and you can even have the evidence preserved, but you don't have to do anything with it. But you can get the help that you need.
Yeah. So, what is the most common misconception people have about trauma survivors?
Um, I think You know, I don't know what the most common is, but I think trauma survivors fear most that nobody's going to believe us, that they're going to think that we're crazy, or they're going to think that we can't be healed. I think that a lot of trauma survivors are afraid. People think, well, then your trauma defines you, and you're just trauma dumping all the time. And I think those are the misconceptions that I know of. I think we all, when I was a kid, I mentioned my father was a professor. My family was a complicated family, but they all are right. But my father was a professor and I read very young. And I remember being terrified that he was gonna, the book Jane Eyre, there's Jane Eyre is the nanny, and there's Mr. Rochester, and there's a mad lady in the attic that was Mrs. Rochester's first wife. And I always was afraid that my father would lock me in the attic. I was always terrified that he was going to put me away. So I think that some of the misconception that people have about trauma survivors is that they're not survivors, but that they're actually hysterical or making it up. And that's a really dangerous misconception because honestly, people, I'm not saying everybody, but people don't make this up. It's too
Yeah,
painful.
it's too. Yeah, they don't. They don't make stuff up like that. So, how
Mm-mm.
do you balance emotional? You do the advocacy. See here. How do you balance that with your personal self care?
Well, I do, as I mentioned, I meditate. I didn't mention that, but I meditate every day. And I did mention that I do yoga, I believe. And I do yoga, which really, yoga is very helpful to me because, and Pilates also, but yoga specifically, because it's the one place where I'm focused on both my breath and the movement. So my mind is completely still in the moment.
Hmm.
So I find that really helpful for me. I also I still right now when I brought the book out to the world, I decided to stay in therapy because I knew that this is new for me and going out here. But I also surround myself with really, really good friends and family and social. I have, we go out, we laugh. I live a life. And so it's a balancing act. I think that I know, like even with these podcasts, when I first started this, I was like, oh, I'm gonna do a podcast every day, every day. And I've learned, no, let's just dial it back a step or two. And there's no rush here. This is a long-term mission. So I've learned how to dial it back a step and be really mindful of like, okay, this is too much for me. Like this is too much. I'm very aware, I have which a lot of survivors of childhoods, my father molested me for almost 10 years. So I have CPTSD. It's which does still make me sometimes like tense up or get, and I know the signs, and I know when that happens, I kind of have a moment that I tap or I breathe, and that helps me. Just a little bit of tapping. I just know how to take a moment to just be quiet and be
Just out,
silent.
yeah.
Mhm.
So were
And,
you ever afraid of how readers would react to your truth?
yes, I was. I laugh about it, but I was really, I think the biggest, so a couple things made me scared when I first started getting reviews. First off, I was like, what if they don't believe me? Like, "Oh my god, what am I gonna do?" And then what if they think the writing is terrible? That was really hard for me because I work really hard on my craft, and aside from the memoir, I'm a writer. I've written essays and short stories before that, but neither of those things happened. Everybody believed me. The other thing that I was really frightened about, this was harder for me. A lot of people, um, really were negative about my mother, and even though, that was harder for me, there's still that tiny, even though I forgave her and we've gone through all this stuff, she's still my mother, and it was a little bit painful when it first started to hear what people's comments were, and yes, obviously, my mother did not protect me. I mean, she really failed to do that. But that was harder, and just making your whole family public. I thought about, people I had worked with. I had lunch with 2 women who were lawyers with me back when, and I was like, "Oh my god, they're gonna be like, they never people didn't know this about me." I wasn't something I advertised, so that made me a little nervous, but I'm over that now. I haven't really had any disbelief. I'm over that. It's my story. I told my story to the best of my ability. And in terms of my mom, you know, this is the truth. She didn't protect me, and I think I'll be honest, I'm glad she's gone. It would have been harder if she was still alive. But I just recently, I haven't seen them since the book got published, went down and saw my mom's, brother and his wife, my aunt, and then my mother's, sister, and I was really kind of nervous, like, are they gonna be really angry at me for writing the book? They weren't. They were sad and sorry, and my aunt was like, who is, my uncle's the youngest, and my mother was the oldest, and my aunt was the middle. And she was like, I wish that I had known. I wish I could have helped you. And I said, I never would have told. I didn't tell grandma. I didn't tell anyone. I never would have told. So don't feel bad.
Well, and that's your mother's side. What about your father's side when
I
the book came out?
I don't have a relationship with them. My father didn't have a relationship with them.
Okay. All right.
So I don't know what they think. He did not have a relationship with them for a good portion of my life, so I don't really. I'm the oldest of both of any of the oldest daughter of oldest children, and my parents were both on the younger side when they had me. So I don't really know. I know I have cousins on that side, but I have never met them. My
Well,
cousins on my mother's side, like I saw my cousins and I've talked to them, and they gave me a hug. And, I have a sister who I'm very close with, and who was not sexually abused, but my father was very abusive in other ways that I talk about in the book. And he was very violent. It was a scary place to grow up. And my sister's been very supportive about the book. And then the other person that made me a little bit nervous reading the book was my niece, my sister's daughter, because she knew both of my parents.
she knew both
And
parents.
yeah, my so she read the book. She's 29, so she's an adult. But she and I sat down and talked about the book, talked about what happened, and I had to, I just wanted to have. I had talked to her before it went out. My sister had read the book twice before it got published. I would not have published it without my sister's okay.
Wow. You and your sister are really close, really close.
Yeah. Yeah, she's
Yeah,
my best friend. We're like
yeah.
2 we're kinda like I think with children like this who go through this, and especially when one is the chosen and one is but we're almost like 2 little kids who grew up in a life raft together. And, I sometimes siblings like that turn away from each other, and
Mhm.
sometimes we're like we survive something together, and we always know that. I talk to my sister like twice a day, so I'm lucky
That's
I have
good.
her.
That's good. That's good. What kind of conversations do you hope your story starts in society?
Well, I hope that my conversation that the biggest thing, the first thing is that people are willing to look at this issue and open and have a conversation about the fact that childhood sexual abuse happens and incest happens. And it's uncomfortable to think about and when I tell people what the book's about, I'm not saying it has to be cocktail hour conversation,
Mhm.
but there has to be a free conversation about it because if we can't have it, then we can't stop it. I think it's also to have conversations with parents, to have conversations with children, about autonomy over their bodies and autonomy, and also, to tell them if someone touches them inappropriately. I think starting those conversations, there's things with kids I've learned. It's like, when people say, "Oh, go hug that person," I'm like, "No, don't make the kid hug that person." You know
Mhm.
what? The kid should have that right. And I think it's starting that autonomy. I think the other conversation is when people tell you this, if a 13-year-old girl comes to you and tells you that this is happening, believe her. She's not making it up.
Yeah.
And I also think that these days right now there's been a lot of funding cut for rape treatment centers and for hotlines, and I would like the conversation be about the necessity to have these organizations and keep this going, because if it's 1 in 4 and 1 in 6, we need to have it, and that doesn't even count the people over the age of 18.
Yeah, I
So
think you're right on that one.
yeah.
Absolutely right. 100%.
So I think it's all of those conversations. But and, I think we also want to if you know someone who's been through this, I think you should, be nice to them, be kind and listen.
Yeah, that's a good, powerful statement. Very powerful statement. What has been the most powerful message you received from a reader?
Singularly, just recently I got um, a an email from somebody who I don't usually get that many direct emails, but I get a
Mhm.
lot of things through DM. And so it's really I was a direct message on Instagram because my Instagram is open. And I got a message, somebody telling you that they had kept this secret their whole life, the same secret. And that, they found the book both hard to read and they realized that, they needed to get help. But I've gotten a lot of those, truthfully. I even got strangely enough, I was at a hotel and I met this young woman who was in
Mhm.
a the spa clerk, and she was asking me about my book, and I told her, and she said that happened to me. So I gave her the book, and I just gave her a copy. I have her, and she wrote me this beautiful postcard thanking me for opening the door and making space for people like her. So
Sounds like another book title.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's things like that. I think, I've had people hug me. I did have somebody come to me at a bookstore and tell me they had adopted a child, and the child was now like 20 something years old and was really struggling. And as it turned out, they had been in foster care at 5 or 6, and this had happened to them. And, that reading my book, they've been has allowed them to open that dialogue with that person, with their adopted child. So I think it's a combination. There's not one moment. I cry a lot when I read the stories. I've had reviews where people have said that, and it makes me cry. I
Hmm.
mean, not like weep, but cry, you know, because it makes me fulfilled. And I've talked to I've talked to the people at the rape treatment center where I volunteer. A lot of the people who are working with the children as advocates, trained social workers and advocates and therapists, have read the book, and they've thanked me for the insight that it's given them. Which is another part of it, is that I really wrote the book. You can tell that somebody is that I'm an older adult person. But at the same time, I kept it, especially at the beginning, which was very difficult to do, very close to the child's point of view, because
Hmm.
I wanted the reader to really feel what I was feeling at the time. It was strange when I wrote those child scenes. I almost got hypnotized and was just like there. It was like
Like
I could
visual.
see.
Yeah.
I'm a visual thinker, so
Yeah. Hey, as we wind down, if your life story had one message for the world, what would it be?
I think it would be that you don't abuse your children, but I think if a survivor tells you that they've been abused, believe them and help them get help. I guess that would be the first message. Can I have two messages? One for
Yes,
the survivors.
absolutely.
Oh, thank you. And for the survivors, my first message to them is it's not your fault.
Wow.
If you forget everything else, just remember that.
So where can our listeners find your book and support your work?
So my book is available anywhere books are sold. It's called Such a Pretty Picture. Amazon, Bookshop, bookstores. You can my last name, Andrea Leeb. If you Google it or just go on, you can find it. And so anywhere that books are sold, I have a author website, and I do have some resources on my author website under resources, aptly named, with hotline numbers, which is AndreaLeebAuthor.com. And then I also have a Instagram, which is Andrea Lisa, Andrea, Lisa the middle name, Leeb. At Andrea Lisa Leeb is my Instagram. And I do answer DMs. So I'm just learning this. This is all new. This has been a real learning for me. I'm not going to lie, Callie. It's our cat. I want to call you Callie for some reason.
Everybody calls me Callie, so that's okay.
But I was a relatively private person my entire life, and suddenly I'm like out there in the public talking about the worst thing that ever happened. So this whole thing, Instagram, podcasts, it's all very new for me. It's a whole new world.
Yeah, you should check out Facebook, because when you post on Instagram, it goes over
I'm on
to
Facebook too.
So it goes.
And yeah. I'm on Facebook too.
Yeah, and if there's TikTok. Some people like TikTok, some people don't. And I think you should pop on TikTok. Like, I don't know your hours or anything like that, but do like a midday, like a live podcast where you're talking to people and people actually join and guide them through their process. Talk about what you're doing, how you got out of what you went
That's a good
through.
idea. You're not the first person to suggest that. I just have to learn
Yeah,
how to do it. I think I'm
yeah,
going to need the help of a 29-year-old to start.
yeah. Think you're gonna be okay.
I think so. And I'm hoping that I can help. I hope that like I said, I really view this as a mission now. So I hope that others will also, that the book, if I wish that this had never happened to me, but since it happened, at least I get the gift of repurposing it for something good in the world.
Yeah. And just remember, when you do become famous, you are from your books, you're going to get a lot of emotions from people gravitating to you. Take the time to do the yoga. Take the time to step back. Take the time to lean on your husband and then go back, because when a woman or a child comes to you and say, hey, I've had this happen to me, you're going to think about what happened to you. So you got to
Thank you.
take that time to step back, because we need you.
Thank you. That's really kind of you to say. And, I don't know about famous, but let's just say just slowly making a difference in the world.
All right. This is Cali Cat Tap Talks, and we're going to say goodbye to Andrea. But make sure you go and get her book. And if you need help, everything is inside that book, and I'll make sure I'll put it at the end of this podcast as well.
Thank you.